Hey everybody, Crow back again with another video response to Novabug's Friday Foursome series. This series where once a month on a Friday, Novabug asks a question, what are your four favorite this or that or other thing, and people like me make video responses. So if you'd like to check out Novabug and make a video response, I highly encourage you to do that. Link for that video will be in the description below. And the topic for this month's Friday Foursome was your favorite gaming magazines. And I had to do this one. I've been doing all of them. I just like thinking about it and doing video responses. But this one in particular, I'm really I was looking forward to doing, because all throughout the 90s, I was all about buying and reading video game magazines from the early 90s to the late 90s. And kind of around 2000, that all kind of stopped for me. I'd get one here or there, but then I'd somehow never read them because of the internet, you know? It was just far easier to look up information on the internet and have your websites, you know, like GameSpot or whatever you would go to. So I just was thinking about, like, what were my four favorite video game magazines? I bought tons of them, you know, PlayStation geared magazines, you know, just for specific systems and for on a whole. But there were always those magazines I bought consistently. And I want to mention that Novabug is in the UK, so the magazines he came up with, I've never really heard of. And I'm sure the ones that I'm going to list off in my video are going to be ones that he really hasn't heard of, because, of course, I'm based in the US. And, you know, there's that gap, especially in the 90s, where you don't really know what's going on in another country unless you're, like, really in the loop and in the know, which most of us as kids were not. So I'm going to, right off the bat, I got to give an honorable mention. This is not one of the four, but I got to give an honorable mention to a magazine called Compute Gazette. And Compute Gazette was a spin-off of a magazine called Compute, which was all about computers. But Compute Gazette was really geared toward the Commodore lines of computers. It started off with the Commodore VIC-20, Commodore 64, and when it kind of ended, it was the Commodore 128. And that kind of started up in 83 and kind of ended in 90. And it was a magazine I think my uncle got and then would give to my dad, and I would kind of go and thumb through it. But really, the only thing I was really interested in that magazine was they always have a section where you could type in your own code, and, you know, it's like, oh, where are the codes for the games? Oh, this game looks interesting, it sounds interesting, there's no screenshots of it, but let me type out all this code and see what the game is like. But I'm not including it on this list because it wasn't something I bought myself. I don't know if you'd consider it a gaming magazine, because it was just all around Commodore 64 stuff. So I just had to throw out the Compute Gazette just because of this earliest magazine I remember looking forward to looking at. But the very first magazine that's going to be on my list, this is the number one, is going to be, I'm looking over here because I have my list over here, video games and computer entertainment. And you're going to forgive me if the descriptions I give of these aren't really accurate or anything. It's based on what I'm going off of from like 20 years ago or so. But I have captured some screenshots of the covers and some of the pages inside to give you an idea of what it was like. But video games and computer entertainment, I remember buying starting in the early 90s. It didn't last much past 95, I think. But the reason I liked the magazine is it was, I don't want to say it was too serious. It was a fun magazine and everything, but it was not aimed towards kids because there was computer stuff in there as well. Also, they talked about arcade stuff. And in fact, the one issue I remember, the very first issue I bought, and I was looking at it on archive.org, had pinball stuff in there. Oh, here's our favorite pinball machine for, you know, 1990 or something. Oh, look at, here's Funhouse. There's screenshots of Funhouse in the magazine, and I thought that was fantastic. The magazine took a more adult approach to video games, and for like the early 90s, that was really drew me to that magazine. and I would really buy it month after month after month. Yeah, they need the typical magazine stuff, the mailbag, the reviews, the tips and tricks, but all, a very plain format, so to speak. Everything's very organized, I would say. And yeah, it was a good magazine. I really enjoyed it. Next up, I gotta say, and this will probably be, if you were in the United States, was probably one of the most popular magazines in the day, and that was Electronic Gaming Monthly. That magazine lasted forever in terms of magazine length of time, from the late 80s into 2010s, I believe. And in its heyday, which is when I read it, the 90s and mid 90s, they were so popular, they had a spin-off magazine, EGM2, for a while, because I guess once a month wasn't enough. They would, so beginning of the month you'd buy EGM, and then halfway through the month EGM2, and you'd get all the information they were churning out. Not only that, but they had buyer's guides. Oh, the 1993 buyer's guide at the end of the year. They even had their own tips and tricks magazine that was just nothing but tips and tricks. But I would buy some of those every so often, but I was mainly really into the main magazine. I really liked, it was a more fun approach compared to video games and computer entertainment, and I was buying those two kind of at the same time. So video games and computer entertainment, you had the more serious looking look, but still having fun. And then EGM was just about fun, more geared towards kids kind of thing. And I liked having two different looks at things every month. But yeah, they would venture into arcade territory as well, but they wouldn't venture into the computer realm. But yeah, EGM, they would always have fun every April. They would have the April Fool's joke in there. The most infamous of all of them was the play as Shenlong in Street Fighter 2. But the one that got me was the one that occurred the year before that, where they said you could play as Simon Belmont in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the arcade game. So yeah, of course, there was a wealth of information. Of course, they had the review crew, which would have 4 people's view on a single game as opposed to just one, which was very unique for the time to have multiple opinions in one magazine on one game. Alright, the next magazine I have on my list is Next Generation. Now, I was thinking that this came out after the PlayStation was launched, but as I was looking at it, it turned out it was January 95 was the first issue, and I had the first issue, and that kind of breaks my brain because I thought I was in the military when I bought the first issue, but I guess that's not the case. But this was a magazine that was very adult orientated. It had none of the goofy stuff from other gaming magazines at the time, and they were solely focused on 32-bit or higher end machines. So they would cover the PlayStation, the Saturn, Jaguar, yeah, that was in there, as well as the 3DO. That's what it was. It was the 3DO they were mainly focused on in the beginning, but also these upcoming games as well. And what really drew me to the magazine is something you're not going to be able to see if you're looking in archive.org and just flip through it. But the paper quality of that magazine was really high end. It was printed on excellent paper. It was a little bit pricier than most magazines too, because of the paper, but also because they didn't have as many advertisements as a lot of other magazines did in the day. I mean, you could flip page after page after page, and they did have a lot of focus on interviews as well, but very, very little advertising in that magazine. I remember being blown away because the back cover of the magazine did not have any advertisements at all on it, and you could kind of put the magazine down, face down, and it would be a continuation of the front cover image. So for my last choice, I'm going to go with DieHard GameFan, or as it would be known in its later years, just GameFan. But I preferred it when it was DieHard GameFan. And this one actually started out in 93, but I actually didn't start buying it until 95, around the same time as Next Generation. So that was my complimentary magazine to Next Generation, which was DieHard GameFan. And this magazine was just completely off the walls. They really wanted to have fun with their magazine. You could see with all of the screenshots and artwork that were in the magazine, there was hardly ever a speck of white in that magazine. Usually pages are white and they would just print, you know, the text and the screenshots on there, and there'd be plenty of white. No. They had to have full color pages. They'd have to, sometimes it made the text hard to read. They had to change the color of the text. But I just really liked how wild that magazine was. And again, all these magazines had your typical reviews and previews and tips and tricks. But this one is just, they had all that, and they always had this Monitor character. I don't know if his name was the Monitor. They'd throw him on the cover every so often, throw him in the magazine. But yeah, this magazine was just about having fun. And that's what really drew me to it. And when it became just kind of GameFan, it kind of became a little bit more laid back. So I kind of stopped buying it at that point. But I love DieHard GameFan. That was just a wild magazine. Like, for example, if they were talking about a game, they would take images from that game and it would be all over the background of the page. It was a wild magazine, and that's why I liked it. And that's it. I've made it through this video, and now I've got to edit it, so and throw in all that magazine picture goodness. And thanks Novabug for continuing the Friday Foursome. I highly recommend it if you're interested in responding at all. Do it in a video response and link it to Novabug's channel. Oh, wait, this isn't 10 years, YouTube 10 years ago. You can't do that anymore, can you? Well, let Novabug know somehow that you've made a response to his video, and move on from there. Thanks for watching. See you next time.